Any serious follower of Jesus would agree that the church is in an ongoing spiritual battle. But how do we fight it? Some say that this is a battle strictly in the heavenly places, where we deal with demons and continually pray to break the power of spiritual bondage. Others say that it's purely an issue of truth, so what we need is proper doctrine. If we fill them with enough correctly interpreted Bible verses, then the battle is won. So who's right? Well, both. And neither. The battle absolutely involves fervent, intentional prayer, and it involves faithful study and teaching of God's Word. We can't do without either. And the Apostle Paul would agree with that. But in today's reading in 2 Corinthians 9-10, he shows us that a big part of this battle, probably the biggest part, is fought in the way that we live. He says in chapter 10 that we're fighting to destroy spiritual strongholds, which many people assume means bringing down demonic curses against us. But Paul makes it clear what he means by strongholds. He goes on to define this in verse 5 as arguments or speculations and every lofty thing that is raised up against the knowledge of God. In other words, what we're fighting against are false ideas and all kinds of distractions that keep people from seeing God and knowing God for who He really is. And Paul says we do that by taking every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. We're fighting an enemy who seeks to keep people from seeing God, who seeks to keep people from continually surrendering to His will, who seeks to keep people from walking in obedience to Him, who seeks to keep us from living lives that enable people to see God at work in us. Back in chapter 9, Paul was talking about the power of generosity. He says that as we give abundantly, God promises that we will receive abundantly. But it's important to understand that he's not talking about some kind of investment scheme where we give so that we can get something back for ourselves. He is simply promising that as we give generously, God will continually supply whatever we need to be able to be even more generous. So our giving supplies very real needs of our brothers and sisters. But Paul says there's an even greater purpose, because since it's God who supplies everything that we need to give, our generosity then gives glory to Him, because it puts His generous heart on display for people to see. And Paul says in verse 13 that this obedience, manifesting itself in generosity, is proof that the gospel is at work in your life. That's how we win the spiritual battle. By our obedience to Christ, we destroy speculations and distractions from the enemy with truth. Truth that is lived in such a way that it shows people what God is like. Then at the end of chapter 10, we see that Paul himself was an example of that. The false apostles had said, remember, that Paul wasn't a true apostle. They said, yeah, he sounds powerful in his letters, but in person, he's not so impressive. But Paul says, even though they say that, we don't defend ourselves. We don't argue with them. We let our lives do the talking. He says, we prove them wrong because our actions show that who we are in our letters is who we are in real life. Paul goes on to make it clear that we don't promote ourselves. We're not pointing people to us. In everything, he says, we point people to Jesus as the source of the life that they see at work within us. That's how we win the battle. We have an enemy who wants to keep people from seeing God. Paul says, fine, show them what God looks like. And that's exactly what Jesus said. He said, let your light shine before all people so that they may see your good works. And when they see your good works, the result of that will be they know the source of those good works. He says they will glorify your Father in heaven. When people really see God, the strongholds have been brought down and the battle is won.